All right, so I mentioned before we kind of got more people in this Tuesday event, but this is something we do every Tuesday at 11 o'clock Central. About 4 or 5 years ago, I created this program where it had a reservoir of videos and training and everything. My background's from the floor and then a prop firm, which is also prop firm wise, Dr. Steenbarger's background. But I put together this program. But one of the unique features that I wanted people to have when they invested in this was access. So in a prop firm, we would meet at least once a week. So every Tuesday we meet at 11 o'clock because Dr. Steenbarger's doing this special session. I've opened it up to many more people that are normally here, and those people know who they are. So we did a sound check and a screen check. I'm just going to leave my screen at Trading Group up for those to look at, but I'm not going to give a long bio on Dr. Steenbarger other than he's a real unique individual in the business, not because he's an author, not because he worked at a prop firm or psychiatrist and everything else, but he's all the above. When I worked at a prop firm starting in 2000, a couple years later, they hired psychiatrists to come in and work with the top traders. And it was part of, working there. And I didn't get a lot out of it. And I think it was because he didn't trade this individual. So then years later, we hear about Dr. Steenbarger had a position at one of Chicago's top firms. And that was the kind of guy to have, someone that had skin in the game as a trader, and then also the background that he has in psychology. So, Brett, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Okay, that sounds very good, Anthony. Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay? Am I coming through?
To me, you are. Let me see everybody else. Everybody else says yes. Sound good.
All right. Very, very good. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to get together and specifically to talk about consistency in your trading, how to become more consistent in your trading results. One of the things I've found in my work with traders is that before traders can get big in their trading, before they can size up, take more risk, they need to become more consistent. And it's that consistency that gives them the foundation to build upon. Without that consistency, they can size up and they end up taking unusually large losses, which hurts their psychology and of course hurts their trading account. So we're going to focus on consistency and ways of developing consistency in your trading. And as Anthony mentioned, I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions that you might have about your trading. And hopefully I can suggest some ways of working on your trading that can take you to that proverbial next level. Okay, so I'm going to emphasize 4 different areas of consistency. The first is consistency in your generation of trading ideas. What I find among the successful traders I work at in hedge funds, proprietary trading firms, asset management firms, is that they have some distinctive process, and that's the key word, process, for thinking about markets, for identifying opportunity. Typically, they have some framework that they use that helps them make sense out of the market action that they observe. There are different frameworks that people can use. Some might use a quantitative framework. Some might use a framework such as market profile. These are ways of thinking about markets, how they're behaving, and ultimately thinking about how opportunity evolves in markets. In my own trading, and my trading is with the S&P primarily, what I do is divide the market in a quantitative way into several components. The first component is a trend component, which you can think of if you run a regression analysis. You draw a regression line through the market behavior. You can identify whether there is a trend on a given time frame. And then in addition to a trend component, I identify one or more cyclical components, cycles. So I look for cycles up and down that have some regularity to them. And many times there will be shorter term cycles and longer term cycles. So I'm looking at cycles within trends. I'm looking at the ups and downs, the bounces and the declines in any market trend. And my goal, if I'm going to be long, is to be buying the lows of those cycles, especially if they're occurring at higher price points. If I'm short, if I'm selling, I want to be selling lower price highs on those shorter term cycles. So that is a framework that makes sense to me, that helps me identify opportunity. It also helps me be consistent in when not to trade. So for example, the bars on my chart and that I use to measure cycles are not time-based. In other words, it's not a 5-minute bar or a half-hour bar or a daily bar. It's a bar based on volume. It's a bar, it's called event time. It's a bar based on market events. Every time the market trades a certain amount of volume, it draws a bar. And so in slower markets, it draws fewer bars. In busier markets, it draws more bars. And that allows me a consistency in trading because I'm not going to overtrade slow periods, because in those slow periods, we just don't get as many bars. So the framework has to be something that makes sense to you, and it has to be something that helps you identify areas of opportunity. That becomes part of a process, so that when you prepare for a market day, you are using that framework to identify where you're at and identify scenarios, if-then scenarios. If the market does this, here's where there might be opportunity. If the market does that, here's where there might be opportunity. And that orients your thinking in a consistent way. Now, many traders focus on those ideas that they trade, and they focus on getting into positions, but they don't focus on the second area, which would be consistency management. In other words, once you place the trade, once you have risk on, do you have some consistency about how to manage that position? Do you have goals for risk management? How much are you willing to lose in the trade? Do you have rules for what I call opportunity management? What would get you to add size to the trade? What would you need to see to gradually scale out of a position? The traders I work with who are successful put every bit as much emphasis on money management and position management as on the generation of the ideas they trade. In other words, much of the profitability comes not from the idea, but from how you size the position and how you manage that size over time. So for example, in my trading, if we are in a lower volatility environment, or if we are in a slower market where we're doing less volume, I'm much more likely to put on a position with moderate size and quickly scale out if it goes my way. Why? Because in a lower volume and a lower volatility environment, any market moves statistically are less likely to extend. On the other hand, If we have growing volume, and if we're in a higher volatility regime, then moves are more likely to keep moving. And in that scenario, I will contemplate entering with reasonably small size, 1 unit of risk, and define what I need to see to add a second unit, maybe a third. So in one regime, I'm putting on some moderate size and taking off quickly, ringing the cash register. In another environment, I'm adding to the position to take advantage of something that might extend. It all comes from the identification of the opportunity set in terms of volatility, in terms of market movement. And there are rules around that. And those rules provide consistency with the management of the position, as well as the generation of the idea that the position is expressing. Okay. Now, a third area of consistency is in your learning and development process as a trader. How do you make sure that you are continuing on a robust learning curve? Where I'm speaking from right now at SMB Capital, we've just gone through a number of team meetings where the team members are reviewing their performance for the month of April. And they have statistics on their trading about how many winning trades occurred during the month, how many losing trades, what was the average size of the winners and losers, which strategies had more winning and losing trades. The statistics look at their trading results as a function of time of day, as a function of market conditions. So there are all these statistics that they can review to identify two big things. One, what have I been doing well? What's working for me in my trading? And two, what's not working? Where am I losing money? So I often joke about my own trading. If I break down my P&L as a function of time of day, trades between 9:30 and 10 in the morning each time, so the first half hour of equity trading, my results are really poor. In that 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock hour, my results are really good. And that's been consistent now for a while. Well, why would that be? Well, it turns out that at the market open, at the New York Open, institutional participants, the execution desks for hedge funds and other management firms, are now active, and that's why you see much more volume in the early minutes of trade. And they might be leaning toward buying or selling, but if I put on a trade before I can get an accurate reading of how those institutional desks are leaning, I can easily get run over. So a rule that I have put in place that has been a result of the review process is that I watch the market carefully for the first X number of minutes before I place an initial trade. So that was very useful, for instance, in yesterday's S&P market. We had quite the overnight drop based on a tweet from the president that threatened the possibility of trade wars, and the market really dropped. We were down something like 500 Dow points, 50 handles on the S&P futures, and then we opened at 9:30 Eastern time in the equity markets, and what happened? Buying, 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 buying. If you look at a statistic called the NYSE tick, T-I-C-K, and particularly if you look at a variation of that tick statistic for all stocks, not just the ones in the stock exchange universe, then right from the very start, you could see uptick, 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 massively and consistently. So what's going on there? That wasn't happening overnight. What's happening? The institutional desks at equity funds have been behind the curve with respect to this recent bull move. We had weakness late last year. They got out of the market, and then we made more or less a V bottom around December 26th, and stocks have been going up, 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 up ever since. And they were many of the funds were relatively late to get onto that bull market. So they're, in relative terms, and relative to their mandate from investors, they are underinvested. So when the market dropped on a tweet, what are the execution desks thinking? It's a gift. This is an opportunity to be more invested. And so they're buying, buying, buying. And seeing that buying, you could anticipate a potential trend. If I had gotten it into my head that there would be trade wars and the market's already overbought and we could really go down, and I didn't follow my review process, which keeps me away from minutes of trade, I wouldn't have observed that, and I wouldn't have been able to profit from it. So that review process of what we're doing that's working and what we're doing that's not working helps us continually channel our activities in useful, productive ways. It's just as important in the review process to identify your strengths, what you do very well, as to identify the weak areas. Many, many times your growth as a trader comes from becoming more consistent with your strengths and sizing those up, not just from correcting your mistakes. So you want to think about your review process. That's review at the end of the day. Maybe review like the SMB traders on a monthly basis. And ask yourself, are your reviews effectively creating goals for your subsequent trading? And are those goals translated into plans that actually help you improve your trading? In many, many, many instances, even when a trader keeps a journal, they're not really using the journal to create specific goals and specific plans that improve their trading the next day, the next day, the next day. And they certainly don't review their old journal entries to track their progress and see where they need to tweak their performance. So the third area of consistency is consistency in your review process, consistency in your learning, in your development as a trader. And the fourth area of consistency is consistency of mindset. Many times, traders end up making suboptimal decisions because they are not in the mind state where they are properly focused and able to rationally weigh options. Studies of blood flow within the brain find that when we are in an optimal state of focus and concentration, we have enhanced blood flow to the brain's frontal cortex. And they're actually biofeedback devices that measure that. On the other hand, if we are emotionally aroused, the blood flow goes back in the brain and is activating the motor centers to prepare us for what's called flight or fight, to prepare us for action. So when we get worked up in some fashion during trading, literally we're taking the blood away from the executive part of our brain, the frontal cortex, and we're feeding, so to speak, the motor areas of the brain that lead us to make possibly impulsive decisions. So to develop consistency in our mindset, we need to develop processes that keep us attached, so to speak, to that frontal cortex functioning. One area of consistency in mindset is in the development of calm focus. This is why we see so many successful portfolio managers and traders make use of meditation, imagery, and visualization methods, because they are regulating their breathing to calm themselves down, and they're focusing on the imagery or maybe a mantra in meditation, so that they're becoming more and more calm, more and more focused. And if they practice that again and again and again and again and again, they can become very good at returning to that calm, focused state. So if something frustrating happens in the market, they get stopped out, or some piece of news comes out and wreaks havoc with our position, of course, we're all frustrated when that happens. We're all competitive. But those traders can pull back quickly from the screen, take some deep breaths, focus their vision, and they can get themselves quite chilled, so that the frustration occurs but doesn't take control of them. It doesn't take control of their trading. So learning how to get yourself in quickly into a state of calm focus is hugely helpful. And meditation is a great tool for that. There's an app called Headspace that actually teaches you meditation techniques that can be quite useful, and that many traders that I work with use. A second area of consistency of mindset is in your self-talk. You want to be talking to yourself, processing information about your trading in a consistent way and in a constructive way. Many, many times, partly because of that emotional arousal, our self-talk about our trading is not very constructive. We become frustrated not just with our action, but we become frustrated with ourselves. And as a result, that negative self-talk ends up distracting us, interfering with our focus, and creates later trading problems. The self-talk that I found works best for traders is learning-based self-talk. When there is a loss or when there is a bad day in trading, you're quick to embrace that as a potential learning experience. In other words, you're in the mindset, your self-talk is saying, either I'm going to profit today in my trading, or I'll profit today in learning about my trading. If I make mistakes, those are going to be my lessons for the day. I am going to learn from them. And so the mistakes now are not threatening. As long as you're using proper risk control, your mistakes are doable, they're manageable, but they're also there to teach you something. The self-talk is constructive because it's moving you forward. Mistakes, I took these losses, what can I learn from them? How can I make sure I take that learning and apply it tomorrow? So that becomes part of your review process. The third area of consistency and mindset is in mindfulness. Now, what's mindfulness? It's self-awareness. It's the ability to stand outside ourselves and observe ourselves, to think about our thinking. So when we are mindful, we can catch ourselves starting to become frustrated or starting to become bored or discouraged. In my first book, I call this taking your emotional temperature. You're standing apart from yourself and you're saying, how am I feeling? What's my state right now? Is it the state where I make my best decision, or is it a state that I need to get out of? So mindfulness allows you to be a better and better and better self-observer. Many with actually set their alarms to frequent breaks during the day, and during those breaks, they have to take their emotional temperature. They have to observe themselves and make sure they're in the right of consistency.
Hey, Brett,
Yep.
real quick, and I don't want to tell you where where to move your head around, but it seems like when I think you lean over the mic, you
Yep.
sound better where you're modulating a little bit. It's been fine. In fact, I found it where I'm following along, I'm listening more closely, but in the last 10 seconds, it kind of got worse. I think if you lean in, if you don't mind. Sounds
Okay.
better.
Can you hear okay now?
That seems the best. Exact. Yeah.
Okay. So I will lean in. Thank you for the feedback.
No,
That's
that's
very
okay.
helpful.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So the fourth area of consistency and mindset is managing our mindset outside of trading. What are you doing in your personal life that gives you energy and energizes your time during trading? So the traders I work with, we focus on their personal lives. There are four big areas of positive emotional experience. The first area is happiness, doing things that are fun. The second area is fulfillment, doing things that are meaningful to you. The third area is energy, doing things that are stimulating. That could be physically stimulating, doing physical exercise, or it could be intellectually stimulating by learning new things. And the fourth area are relationships, closeness, things we do to be attached to people that matter to us. So four big areas of positive emotional experience: having fun, happiness, doing fulfilling things, doing energizing things, doing things that bring us close to people. We want to be firing on all four of those cylinders daily and weekly. We want our time outside of trading to be as positive as possible so that we are fully energized during trading hours. The research in an area called positive psychology finds that when we are happy and fulfilled, we are more likely to perform well, we are more likely to be creative in the ideas that we generate, and we're less likely to be distracted. So the time we spend outside of trading is very important to our trading. That's why many traders I work with have routines for physical exercise. They have routines for spending time productively and in a fulfilling way with their family members. And that allows them to be in a positive mindset for their trading. That's a vulnerability where traders who are completely focused on trading and are watching overnight markets, after hours, and they're thinking about trading and fretting about trading after hours. Those are energy depleting activities. The trader may justify that by saying they have a passion for trading, but in fact, what they are doing is burning themselves out. We need to renew ourselves by doing things outside of trading in our personal lives that keep us positive, keep us energized. So these are four areas that can contribute to our consistency in trading: having processes and routines for generating ideas, having rules for managing positions, having processes for reviewing and learning about our trading, and processes that provide us with consistency in our emotional functioning, in our mindset. If you can be working in those 4 areas to be at your best, your trading results are most likely to be consistent and consistently positive. So on that note, I'd like to open it up. I do have a meeting at 1 o'clock, so I'll need to finish a little before 1 o'clock. That still gives us a good number of minutes for questions and comments.
No, it gives us a lot of time. I really appreciate it. In fact, when you were modulating a little bit, it actually made me listen more closely and pay attention.
Right.
Right? Because I think we all have a problem listening. Some have a big issue with it, some not as much. But I really believe as I coach young kids, they have an excuse not to listen. They're 7 and 8. But as adults, as I coach and help people, I get that a lot of times people don't listen. And I ain't making fun of anyone. I'm guilty as charged.
Right.
Right? You notice that with people?
Absolutely, particularly my children.
My wife will say that she has that issue with me, but
Right.
who knows? One of the things you said was emotionally, when you're emotionally aroused, the blood goes to the back of your brain.
Right.
How about
Other
sexually
areas,
aroused?
yeah.
How about sexually aroused? Where does it go? No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, right. Well, it's not going to the executive area. Let's just put it that way.
So back of the brain, emotional, front of the brain when you're in a zone and focused. Correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And there's studies done or ways to actually be able to monitor that you mentioned.
Yeah. On my blog, the Trader Feed blog, I have some early articles on what's called hemoencephalography, which is a technique for measuring forehead skin temperature. It turns out that the forehead channels the blood flow. And so when we are activating the frontal cortex, when we have more blood flow, we actually heat up a little more in our forehead.
That
So
makes sense.
we can use that as a proxy for whether we're more focused or less.
And traders,
A way of doing that would be to monitor our brain waves. And there is EEG biofeedback, which is feedback about our brain waves.
And you got more info on your Traders Feed Twitter account, correct?
Yeah, and Trader Feed, the blog. Yeah, so if you go
Right,
traderfeed.blogspot.com, or if you Google the word Trader Feed, TraderFeed, and then biofeedback, you'll see Google will connect you to a whole bunch of links and articles.
Yeah, if they Google tradersfeed.blogspot, they'll get all your stuff historically, I would imagine.
Yeah, but if you Google a specific topic,
right,
and the word Trader Feed, you'll just get the posts on that particular topic.
perfect.
So you could do Trader Feed and the term stress management, or Trader Feed and biofeedback, or Trader Feed and hypnosis. You'll see
And
links.
you've been blogging since like 2007 or 8, Brett?
I think 2006 actually is when I started. So it's been quite a while, and there are well over 5,000 posts dealing with trading psychology. I'm pretty sure it's the largest database of posts and articles on trading psychology that is available.
All right, let me ask you a question from Tom. Tom is a longtime member of my room in my community. In fact, he started
Great.
when I started, and I backed into this educational environment back in 2012. He asks, and he's a big fan of yours.
Great.
He likes your stuff. He says, what thoughts and techniques do you recommend right as we enter a position and shortly afterward to stay focused and relaxed?
Well, if you have been practicing techniques like motivation, then by controlling your body, you automatically activate control of your mind. So, for instance, in a meditation exercise, you are regulating your breathing very deeply, very slowly, and you're doing that while you're in a focused state so that your body and your mind learn to associate the slow, deep breathing with the higher degree of focus. So if you have just entered a trade, one thing that can be very helpful in monitoring it and managing it going forward is to intentionally slow down your breathing. If you've been practicing the meditation outside of market hours, then you can become very good at increasing your focus when your breathing slows. And that helps you stay focused on the market activity and managing the position as best you can.
And another question he had was, what methods would you recommend to reset mentally and emotionally after a negative trading event? Maybe a few bad losses, a big loss, a bad day, bad week. Is there any kind of go-to method to use to hit the reset button?
Yeah, and two, one is something I mentioned, and that is, I really want to be in the mode of embracing the mistakes, the bad days, or the bad trades. I want to actively study them, look at them, learn from them, so that I go away from the losses with some useful learning lesson that takes me forward. If I don't learn from my mistakes, then it's a total loss, right?
Yeah.
So I want to extract learning and development from my worst trades. And that turns a negative, at least partially, into a positive. The other thing that I think can be very, very useful in dealing with our poor trades is if we have a trading buddy, if we have a group that we connect with in our trading. And it could be an online group, it could be a group on the trading floor, like here where I'm working today at SMB. If you have people you can share with, then not only do you have a way to vent frustration, but you have someone who can bounce ideas around with you to help you learn from the mistakes. So I find that working in a team environment is very, very helpful in terms of managing some of those frustrated emotions.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, that's the nickname of our other room. When people do this program, they get Tuesday sessions like this week and all these videos, but also access to an all-day room. And we nicknamed it the team room because the guys are not just typing to share information. They're talking and listening as if they're sitting next to them in an office environment. It's what got me from a failing trader ready to quit the business on the floor to making more money than my dad. And I was home at 11 o'clock in the morning because we just traded European hours when I went electronic, because I was around other guys that were doing it and impromptu desk-to-desk banter. Had a tough day. They could understand what you were going through because they go through it. It's hard to talk about trading to someone who never did it, right? They don't understand what we go through. A plumber, I always say a plumber could talk to us about toilets and faucets. We use them, but we can't talk to him about trading unless he does it. And it's really important.
And you're absolutely right, Anthony. That is a huge value of a group such as yours. The other area of value is not only in terms of support and supporting each other, but when people discuss their mistakes and what they've learned, everyone is learning from everyone else. It's called vicarious learning and or social learning. And so when someone else makes a mistake and learns from it, I absorb that. And when I make a mistake and learn from it, someone else observes that and takes that lesson in. So now the learning is multiplied many times because we're learning not only from our own experience, but from the experiences of others.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And too many people pick, just because you have a community, don't mean it's the right community. I like forums, but you can't use it as a way to be connected. I think at some point you have to have connection where you actually talk and listen and share
Yep.
on that level. There's too much texting, emailing as a way to communicate, and it's not human, and it's not maximizing the way
Right.
to truly connect. Someone asks an interesting question here, Brett, and that's as he asks it, I think about this a lot because is it do you it seems like a weird question, but it's a great question. Do you suggest working out early in the morning before you trade or midday? Because it seems like exercising could drain the energy that you need. How would
Yeah,
you
it's
reply to that?
yeah, no, actually, it's a great question. Now, I wake up early in the morning, partly because I work with macro traders and they're trading in London and Asia and so forth. And so to wake up that early, I do have a workout routine first thing in the morning, very early. And I find that gets the blood flowing, it gets me more engaged, and it really helps my energy level through the day. So for me, that's what works. I know other people who do a midday exercise break, particularly if they've been trading actively in the morning and now they want to do a reset and become more focused, have more energy for the afternoon. And that can work very, very well. So you have to know your own rhythms and what's most useful for you. I would say that in general, if you do your exercise early in the morning and find that energizing, it is still useful to have some activities that you can turn to as part of a midday break to reset your concentration and to step back from your trading. One thing we did in Chicago at the trading firm I worked with is we divided the trading day. These are mostly day traders. We divided the trading day into two trading days. There was a morning trading day and an afternoon trading day, and we would keep a separate morning P&L and afternoon P&L, and we would have a separate loss limit for the morning trade and for the afternoon trade, and there would be a break in between the morning and afternoon. And during that break, people would review their morning, they would review the markets over the morning, and they could make adjustments so they could have a better afternoon. So they created 2 days out of one and enabled themselves to adapt more quickly when they made mistakes. But it was that break in the middle of the day that allowed them to do that.
That's an awesome idea, or else it's a long day and you start chasing if you had a bad morning. In fact, just end it and start anew. That's a great idea. I want to add something about working out. I think people with anything, they start out doing stuff too much or too little. So they work out too hard or not hard enough. And you got to find that middle ground. So I think if you work out and not waste energy in the morning, and you're going to do it in the morning, there was a guy that was on a podcast, and I wish I could remember it, but he said, unless you're training for a specific event that's in 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever, people work out too long or too hard. You should work out hard enough to the point where you start feeling really good and then stop. And that could be 10 minutes and half an hour for different people. But he said, unless you're training, don't work yourself to exhaustion. So if you're doing too hard of a workout where you're really burning yourself, yeah, you waste some energy and that might be detrimental through the trading day. But if you just, like you mentioned, just get the blood flowing, do something.
Get the blood flowing. And I would say if at some point you're not breaking a sweat, you're probably not growing in your working out.
Oh, that's the reason. Okay. I thought there was because I did that, Brett. I'm not a morning guy. And when you work out too hard, you feel great and then you hit a wall, right?
Right.
But you think,
yeah, you don't want to exhaust yourself.
It's funny because you think you're working out. Well, you just said, and you don't break a sweat. Maybe maybe you didn't really work out. That's a good tell. Sometimes the simplest ideas, not sometimes, most of the time, are your best tells. Like, one of the things that I knew you were a big fan of and we're developing it even more, so I don't want to get into too much detail, but when I told you, you kind of lit up and liked it. Like I said, I don't want to get into a long discussion, but the verbal journal that I created about 6-8 months ago, that's where you could record your verbal notes, and they specifically record at that time and moment on a chart. And boy, the people that use it love it. But like anything else, if you don't use it, you're not going to get anything out of it. But you could tell from the inflection of your voice a lot and gain a lot. Because people, I think, lose
track of their thoughts and their efforts, because there's a question in here about how does Brent know about this verbal journal and how would he use it? So how
Well,
would you?
yeah, definitely as a regular part of a review process. And I agree. There's research on how we process information, and processing information in multiple ways helps our learning. So if we process information by reading something, by writing it, by talking about it, those are all different modalities. And if we do all of those, we're much more likely to have the information stick than if we just rely on one modality. And so by adding a modality to the charts where we can actually talk and record and put it on the charts, now we're combining the visual sense of looking at the chart with the sense of talking aloud, with the sense of hearing ourselves, and that's much more likely to make those lessons stick. So I think that is a really good idea for daily review processes.
Yeah, you got to get it off your chest. Just talking about it makes you feel better.
It's
Sometimes.
taking a constructive step. Absolutely. Yeah. We're getting on in time. Unfortunately, like I said, I have a 1 o'clock meeting I have to prepare for. Let me just mention one other thing. It's a topic I haven't touched upon, and it's a topic that appears in a few of my Forbes articles. I write articles for Forbes. If you Google Forbes and Brett Steenbarger, you can find a whole list of those articles. But the topic is the topic of my new book that I'm currently writing, and that is trading and spirituality. There's been a lot written about trading psychology, not a lot written about spirituality in trading. The key hypothesis or the key idea behind the book is that many of the problems that interfere with our good trading are not psychological problems in the sense of having some emotional disorder. Many of the problems that affect our trading are problems of the ego. Our egos get in the way about P&L, about fear of missing opportunities, about greed. And so once we become ego attached to what we're doing, we no longer take those actions for objective reasons. Spirituality in all its forms, whether it's religious practice or spiritual practice from the East, as in meditation and so forth, spirituality helps us move beyond the ego and access the soul. And it's my belief that the best trading that we do comes from the soul, not from the ego. And there are interesting techniques from the world's great spiritual traditions that help us be more soulful. So I'm in the process of writing about that. There'll be more on my blog, and I certainly invite listeners to be part of that. The book is being written on a blog platform, and so will be accessible to everyone. So that'll be a lot of fun.
What's going to be the title of it, Brett? Do you know yet?
Radical Renewal.
That's cool. That's a great idea for. Is there any way to get it now, or it's not for sale yet?
I'm in the middle of writing it, and it'll be ready later this year.
Later this year. All right.
But thanks for the interest, and I'll be putting more information about it on the Trader Feed blog.
No, that's a great idea. What was the title again?
Radical Renewal.
Radical Renewal. Great title.
Yeah, it's about renewing ourselves.
Can we get one more question in, and then you got to go? You got 9 minutes, but I don't want to keep you all the way to 1.
I don't have 9 minutes. But
you don't. He's got to run.
I have to run. But if you have a quick question, I'm happy to answer.
Well, it was just on what's the minimum account size that you recommend?
Oh, it's a very important question. Many traders trade with way too small an account size and hope to be making a living from their trading. It's insane. They start with a few $1,000s and somehow they're going to leverage that into making a good living. That simply doesn't happen. The people I work with who are very, very successful portfolio managers, they're not doubling, tripling, quadrupling their money year after year. So you have to make money, you have to start with enough capital. And if you don't have enough capital, the answer is not to have a small account and take too much risk. That's just a way to ruin your psychology. The answer is to join a firm, whether it be a hedge fund or a proprietary trading firm, that can afford you the capital so that you can trade enough size to make a meaningful living from your trading.
Brett, what are the name of the 2 books that you already wrote?
I've written 4 books on trading and psychology, and I've written some other books, academic books in psychology. I teach at a medical school in Syracuse. Okay. But the most recent book is Trading Psychology 2.0.
Okay, because someone asked about other books, but just Google
Trading Psychology 2.0. Another book that might be of interest is The Daily Trading Coach, which is a collection of self-help techniques for traders. But Trading Psychology 2.0 talks about being process-oriented, talks about creativity and the role of creativity in trading results. Those 2 might be worth checking out.
Well, we'll let you go, Brett. I can't thank you enough for sharing this time and answering questions and great content. I did record it, and some people you can't see that, but they're thanking you as well. So have a safe rest of the week, and thank you again.
Okay, good trading. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Brett. I'm going to wrap things up, guys. I'm not going to quit just yet. There's a couple questions that I'll answer. The verbal journal I brought up, verbaljournaltrading.com. It only works on NinjaTrader 7 and 8 and Sierra Chart. So if you have 1 or 2 or one, either one of those, go to verbaljournaltrading.com. As I mentioned before, this Brett has done, I think, 2 sessions for us on these Tuesday events. I try to get him in here as often as possible because he always has good content. And like I said, he's unique because if he was just a psychologist and didn't trade and have that skin in the game, would it be helpful? Sure. I think there's a lot of help from people who talk about trading psychology, but bleeding both together, to me, if you look at my screen a second, I'll show you this is important as a visual for anything. If you could take 2 things and you overlap, to me, that's where the power and the success lies, in the overlap. So the fact that he trades and the fact that he has a background in psychology, that overlap makes him one of the more helpful guys on the marriage between the mind and the markets, I think, in the industry. And he only really does things with reputable people. That's another reason why you could you get a lot out of his Twitter following. And also a unique guy because he's very open with his access, something that is surprising with anyone. Not too many people are accessible because they want to be important. And I always say important people are important because they're available. And that's why a lot of people have talked to me in the past on private conversations, because those who want to be important always are like, well, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for this. I can't get back to an email. And too many vendors, not just in this business, but in every business, have that. And I don't think that that's the right approach in any industry. The other thing I wanted to add was some other questions that he had about, we ended with minimum account size. I think the game has changed a little bit, allowing people with less money to come in because of these micro contracts being liquid. They were just launched Sunday night, Monday, and the volume is, forget about the volume, it's higher than average on all markets because of the volatility we've had the last 2 sessions. But it's liquid. It has tradable contracts on the best bid offer in all the indexes from what I could see. So while the commissions are a little much, they're kind of like 50% of the tick value. I do think that, sure, you could come in with too little money, and that's a common negative for a lot of traders who get into this business. I think the bar has been lowered because it's an inexpensive way to not get whacked around quick with a $12.50 per tick or $5 in the NASDAQ, which really could add up quick. Even it's hard to trade small
because you could only trade one lots. Now with these micros, though, I think it's changed the game a little bit. You still can't come in with $1,000. I just make it really hard for you, as Dr. Steenbarger said, leveraging that into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Think about what it would take to do that. The other mistake people make is they get to a point where they think, oh, it's the psychology I'm missing, and I could bone up on hone in on those skills, and I'll be better, or that's my missing piece. Only if you know what you're doing. I tell people meditation and some of the exercises and techniques that Brett talked about are great. They'll all work. They'll all help, but you have to know what you're doing. So you have to know how to value price before any of that other stuff is going to work. And it all comes down to two things. And I think that from what I've talked about today, you got a lot of great content from Brett, but from what I've said today, if you can remember just these two things, if you're not understanding order flow and intermarket correlations, then go try to become a plumber or some other career. Those are two things you use to value price of anything with a price attached to it. So why wouldn't you use those two things to value the price? The S&P minis, crude oil futures, Forex, a stock, anything with prices affiliated with it. It has to do with order flow, which is buyers and sellers, and intermarket relationships, which are markets that influence the market that you're trading. Don't forget that. Some of the best trades I've ever taken and that you'll ever take have come from a relationship, lead lag, a news event. And now this next comment might not be relevant to people who watch us on a recording, but the next comment you might hear this week could be China cancels their trip to the U.S. to continue trade negotiations, or something positive that they've extended their stay and they're working on it. Because right now in the market is the driver was they priced in a U.S.-China trade deal 72 hours ago, and now they're pricing that there might not be a deal. It's still kind of on the fence. Now we have room to rally if there is a deal, and we have room on the downside for stock indexes if they do not have one. They're kind of back in the middle. They've taken out pricing in a deal after some of the rhetoric over the weekend that China might be backing out on some of their promises. So if you guys have any other questions I can answer, pop them in there. I did record it. I know that his audio was kind of in and out, but it was still understandable, and it made me listen a little closer. I am a big proponent of people, and don't take this personal. We all have weaknesses, and everybody, when we listen, we often listen through our own filter, and we kind of listen for what we want to hear, and it gets us into trouble. Me too. You can't just hear what you want to hear or what you think. You got to be open-minded and take it all in. And also remember this, because we're open in this event to more people than just our core edge guys, that the whole thing about education is there's some good education out there, and there's some okay education, and there's some great, and there's some real crap. Buy it all, get it all, because you'll learn from even bad stuff, and you'll have the ability to compare it to what's good. I never have sympathy for people who spent a lot of money in education, and here's why. Because I spent a lot of money in not education to try to learn how to trade on the floor only, but also in a profit split, being in a prop firm for 7 years. And I'm not bitter about that. It's a hell of a lot more than you'll ever spend in education. Just remember, every business has good, bad, and okay stuff. Trading education is no different. But make sure, if you want to kind of filter down into what's good and what's not, make sure it has elements of order flow and intermarket correlations, and that should ring a bell, because that's what you use to value the price of a car, and it should be part of what you use to value the price of the S&P minis. And so the psychology behind it, hey, if someone could give you good psychology when you go negotiate the price of a car, you're in a better position to negotiate. Generally, we all have the ideas of what we're going to say to the car salesman, and when push comes to shove, all of a sudden it's out the window, and we just get emotional and buy the damn thing. So you got to be calm in a storm. Thanks for coming, guys. I did record it. It'll be up for Edge Guys in the normal spot. and I'll the people that registered, I'll send it out to. I don't know if I'm going to put it on YouTube just yet. Our YouTube channel, subscribe to it, but search Edge Trading Group and you'll find it. There's videos there daily. So if there's nothing else, we'll see Edge guys next Tuesday. We'll see Trading Room guys tomorrow. Just keep your eyes and ears on a news source for the next big move, which could come from them canceling a meeting. Anticipate it. Take advantage of it. Take care, guys.